This morning we're going to talk about layers. I'm going to open a different drawing file this morning, 4C1224, because it has more entities and it'll be a little more interesting drawing to work on for this topic. So when I first call the drawing up, this is a completed drawing that we've done. And this is in what we call paper space, which has our title block and our border and location map and text associated with the sheet and things like that. But I'm going to go over here at the lower left, just above the command line, and click on the tab that says Model for model space. And that's going to put us in our working space. I need to change the line type scale. There's a variable in AutoCAD called LT scale, or IntelliCAD, that I use all the time, and I'm constantly toggling those back and forth. In paper space, the LT scale needs to be set to 0.5 for it to work properly. But when I'm in model space, the LT scale variable needs to be set to 1/2 the drawing scale, which I believe is 1 to 30 in this case. So I'm going to change it to 15, and that enables my line types to come in correctly. Now the contours are dashed as they should be. This special line type that I created right here called Zone A, which designates the FEMA flood zone, the text is now visible. If I toggle back where I was, LT scale equals 0.5, the line types disappear. It's because the line type scale is not set correctly for the space we're working in. So I'm going to go back to 15. If you want to know what scale your drawing is in, you go up to Settings on the drop-down menu and look at Drawing Setup, and it tells you your horizontal scale right here is 1 inch equals 30 feet. Now we're ready to start working. So when we're drawing in CAD, before we begin drawing anything, we need to decide what it is that we're drawing. And what we draw determines what our active layer is going to be. This drawing here has no buildings on it, so it's fairly simple, although it has these contours. It doesn't have parking stripes, a lot of things like that, so it's a relatively simple drawing. If I call up my layer dialog, which is LA, it shows me all my available layers and their states. So we have a number of states that our layers can have. They can be locked or unlocked. So let's just highlight one of them. Let's make it the join text layer. The fact that it has a check mark beside it indicates that it's the current layer. It's the active layer. So it tells me my color, my line type, whether the layer is on or off, locked or unlocked, frozen or thawed. It gives me the line weight, whether it's printable in this in model space. I never mess with the print toggle. I generally do not turn layers on and off. I freeze or thaw them instead. As I understand it, the difference between turning a layer on and off and freezing and thawing is that it takes up less space in your graphic memory to keep the layer frozen than it does to turn it off. So let me demonstrate something real quick. I'm going to draw an arc. I'm going to zoom out here pretty far. Draw an arc. I'll draw a line to the midpoint of the arc. Now if I start to zoom in, you see that it looks like this arc is a series of straight lines, which indeed it is. The CAD program can only draw an arc as a series of straight lines. And as you work in the drawing and zoom around, it tends to make these lines larger, and that is to save on video memory. Although I snapped to the intersection of the arc, now there it changed it. It automatically regenerated. Now it looks smoother because I zoomed in further. It automatically regenerated the screen. Let's zoom back out. Zoom in slowly again. See what happens. Well, now it's not. There we go. It still looks like the line is missing the arc slightly. So if I go over here to the left on my toolbars, I've got this red icon that says regen, and that will fix that. So if I click that, it regenerates the screen and it displays the arc at a higher resolution, and it makes it look smoother. So the display just of the entities just does this in order to save on graphic memory and speed up the drawing process. Otherwise, if it's constantly showing entities at their maximal resolution, that takes up more memory and processing power. So to save on that, it kind of tends to dumb the entities down sometimes. So that's just something to be aware of. It may look like one entity is not touching another, or that it's crossing or something like that, when in reality, if you hit regen, it's not doing that. It will display it correctly when you hit that. I like regen instead of redraw. Redraw doesn't repeat what I did. So now you can see it's gone back to displaying as what looks like a series of straight lines. And the more I zoom in, now if I click regen, it smooths that arc back out. I like using regen because it regenerates all the entities and the coordinates for those entities. It's more effective than redraw. Redraw is just not that useful to me. I am always using regenerate when I want to regenerate my entities in my screen. Now, there are a number of ways you can change layers, and you can change what layer an entity is on. I can go to my pull down as we went over previously, and I can select any of these layers and it will make it the current layer. I like to, in general, keep my layer set to this adjoined text layer, which we use as a general text layer. If I select any of these text entities, it will tell you what layer it's on, and it indicates most of these are on the adjoined text layer. If you hit escape after you select something, it gets you out of that selection. This is true of the asphalt paving label here, of the road label, but it's not true of the calls. The survey calls are on a different layer. They're generated on the bearing text layer, which is a layer created by Carlson. It's difficult for me to select some of these entities because they're masked, and we'll go over that later. So what can I do with these layers and layer states? I've got my layer state set up right now so that it is in its final configuration for plotting. I have hidden all the unnecessary layers and work layers that I don't want to appear on the drawing or I don't want my client to see. We hide the raw data and we only display the final product, and that is this layer state right here. If I want to thaw all the layers, I've got this layer toolbar, and everything on this line where it shows the layer name, I've got it set up so that everything across the toolbars here are configured to manipulate layers. So let's go across the toolbar and see what we can do. I can isolate a layer. So let's say I want to isolate one or more layers. I'm going to isolate the contours. I'm going to select the index contour, which these are 1 foot contours. The index contours are every 5 feet. So it goes from 10, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 10, 30. I'm going to select just the contour layers and isolate them. So after I'm done selecting the layers I want to isolate, I'm going to right click and it isolates those layers, and there I have just my contours. I can restore by clicking the next button over, Restore Layers. Now let's isolate the boundary layer, the property boundary, which is always red the way we have it set up. Select my property boundary. It only shows me the boundary. Now I can restore. I can save this layer state by hitting LA, calling it my layer dialog. And if you go up here to the top, you've got a number of options, but one of them right here is the Layer States Manager. If I click on that and I click New Layer State, I can call it anything I want. I'm going to call it Final. And I can click OK and just accept the default and click Close. And now I'm going to close my layer dialog. Now let's mess around. Let's put all layers on. That's this toolbar. The yellow toolbar to the right up here. Thaw on all layers. That makes every layer visible in the drawing. So now you can see it looks much more messy. I've got an image here. It's even hiding some of the layers because the image is in front. It's hiding some of the entities. So I'm going to move this image to the back. I can do that by going over here to my Draw Order tool. That's the last toolbar in that row. I can make that image go to the back by clicking the back tool on the Draw Order toolbar. So I want to click the edge of the image because that's the only way you can select an image. You can't select an image out in the interior anywhere on it. You have to go to the edge because that's its frame. Now I'm going to make it go to the back. And now you can see it's behind everything else. And it's allowing you to see all the entities that we just thawed. Isolating an entity layer is a good way to manipulate just those entities. So I'm going to take these calculated points. These without descriptions are calculated points we just set up for our initial survey. So we could go to tie into extra corners if we needed to somewhere. So I'm going to isolate the calculated point layers here. And those are just calculated points. I might want to just get rid of all of those. So I'm going to hit E for erase and erase them. and then restore layers. Now the calculated points are gone. I'm going to undo that. Go all the way back to where I was, several steps. There's another way that you can erase all the entities on one layer, and that is by using this tool right here, Erase by Layer. So if I select that, and I select any layers I want from the screen using this button, I can then select the calculated point, and it will erase. When I hit OK, it shows you the name of the layer that's on, Points Lot Calc. Click OK, and it will erase them that way. It's a very handy tool. Now, what if I want to clean up I'm going to undo that, bring those points back. I don't want to modify this drawing. So what if I want to set this up for printing and get rid of all the layers that I don't want to be visible? I'm going to hit Freeze Layer by Pick. I'm going to start picking the layers I want to turn off or freeze. So I click Freeze Layer by Pick, click the edge of the image, and it makes it go away. Click the point node, it makes the calculated points go away. These with descriptions and elevations are the points we collected in the field. Those are our raw points. I'll select that point node, not the description over here, but the node. It'll make that layer go away. These triangulation lines, these magenta lines, are our topo surface. I want to make those go away. I can click those. Here's a control point I don't want to show up on the drawing. That's a control point symbol. So I just click on it and it makes that go away. So I believe we're now back to our printable state. Now I'm going to undo all that again. What if I want to very quickly get back my state for printing? I can hit the LA key, call up my layer dialog, go to Layer States Manager, select the final layer state that we saved, and click Restore down here at the bottom on the right of the dialog. Restore. Close the layer state dialog, and it has restored our saved layer states. What else can we do? We can change a layer, select entities to be changed. So I want to change what layer an entity is on, so I'll just select this Zone A line. Right click. Now I can pick another entity. I click this prop lines entity, and it changed the line to the prop lines layer. Now it did not change the characteristics of that line, but it did change the layer that it's on. That's because in this particular instance, although they're usually defined by the layer itself, I have defined this polyline with its own color and line type because I didn't have a suitable layer for that to be on. I had to create that custom line type. We'll go over that later. So let's choose something else that's more illustrative of what we're doing here. Change layer. I'll change this contour. Entities in set 1, right click, pick an entity to change the layer to, and there you see that it changed it. Changed its properties and everything. I'm going to undo that because I don't really want to do that. I can very quickly change an entity by using this Match Properties tool right up here on the toolbars where I'm hovering now, Match Properties, and I can click that button, and it's really handy for just changing the properties of one entity to another entity. So select entity to copy properties from. I select this property lines layer right here. Then select the entity I want to inherit properties. I select the zone A line. And you notice it changed everything about that line. That's because matching properties is different from changing layers. It changed the layer state and also every property about that line. I'm going to undo that. You can also change text the same way. So match properties. This is a piece of text. I want another piece of text to match it. I'm going to select my call. Notice that it matches the text type and the rotation of the text. I'm going to undo that. So it's a very handy tool to use. Let's try it one more time. Match properties. Select the boundary and select this yellow dash line, and it changes it to a boundary line. Undo. I can set a current layer, pick entity with layer to set, and any entity I select, it will make that the current layer. It'll match it. So you can use that instead of the pull down if there's an existing entity in the drawing that you want to use to make your layer current. I'm going to go back to my text layer here. You can lock layers. So this is useful sometimes. I'm going to isolate my contour layers again, including the contour label, its interval. Then I'm going to select lock layers. It now locked those layers, and you can see it sort of faded them back a little bit. Now I'm going to restore my layer state. This is useful if you want to preserve a layer and make sure that nothing on it gets moved or edited. So now, since that layer is locked, if I try to erase anything on that layer, it won't allow me to erase it. It won't allow me to move it. See if I can copy it. Won't allow me to copy it. So I can't really do anything to it because I have locked it. So now I can go to unlock, and I can select each entity layer and unlock the layers. Now if I want to erase, I can erase them and modify them. So if you want to absolutely preserve the integrity of a layer, you lock that layer. It's handy sometimes if you want to erase some things on one layer and there's a lot of entities and you're trying to pick them out from entities on other layers. You can either isolate, say I wanted to erase these contour labels. I could isolate that layer, and then I can erase all those, restore layers. Or I could lock all my layers by selecting them. I could unlock just this layer with the contour numbers. Then I could erase and select everything without affecting it and erase just the contour labels. I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to unlock all my layers. What else do we have? Turn off layer by pick. I don't normally like to turn off. I like to freeze by pick. So I ignore these. Typically, you're not going to see layers that are turned off. You're going to see that they're frozen down here. On your layer dialog, which you call up by the LA command, you can see which layers are frozen and which ones are thawed. The ones with the little snowflake are frozen. The ones with the sunshine are on. Set level, I'm not sure what it does. I never use that. I suppose you can select an alternate name for that layer. I'm not sure. That's not one that I use. Hide by selection. If you select hide by selection, it will hide that entity on the screen. You can click over here to show all to restore it. So that is to hide specific entities, but it doesn't hide everything on that layer. As far as draw order is concerned, let's just go ahead and go over the text mask command. So I've got a lot of my text in this drawing masked because I don't want overlapping text. I don't want entities overlapping my text, making it difficult to read. So that's why we use mask. These contours take up a lot of room in the drawing. They create a lot of interferences. So for instance, here on my bearing and distance, you can see it crosses all these contours. So I mask the text so it hides those entities under the text. And it hides them because the text layer is above the contour entities. If I go over here and I select front in my draw order, I can select all these contours and it will bring them to the front, and they will no longer be hidden by the mask. They're now drawn through the bearing text. I don't want that. So there are two commands you can use. There is text mask, which the shortcut for that is TM, and there is text unmask, and I don't have a shortcut for that, but I just start spelling it out and it pops up, and I can remove the mask from that text. If I hit TM, select an entity, now it asks me for the offset distance. You typically want that to be equal to 1/10 of your scale. So the scale is 1 inch equals 30 feet. I would set it to 3. So I'm going to keep that default. And there it masks a border of 3 feet all the way around the text. So that's how draw order works. I can bring to the front, I can send to the back. So again, over here I can select one of my contours, bring it to the front. I can select it again, send it to the back. I can select one entity to put above another entity, or one to put under another entity, which I don't typically use those really at all. I typically like to use front or back and just move them around as needed. In rare cases, you might want to use those last two, but I don't typically use them. Now let's thaw our surveyed points. What I did there is hit LAT, which is layer thaw. It calls up a dialog and allows me to see what layers are frozen. And I can select one of them, which is the points layer, click OK, and it thaws that layer. So these are our points collected in the field that we based our topo on and our as-built features on. So we don't have that many as-built features in this drawing because we don't have buildings or sidewalks and things like that. But we've got a handful. Our primary as-built feature here is the utilities, phone, electric boxes, transformers, and the edge of pavement. So if I want to start drawing this drawing from scratch, I need to determine what I'm going to draw first. And typically in this one, I will probably draw the edge of pavement. So I'm going to erase those. My edge of pavement layer is existing pavement, X paving. And then I'm going to draw a polyline because I don't want these to be independent entities. I want them to be connected. And I'm just going to start drawing from point to point, a series of lines. I've got my F3 key on, my O snaps are on. It's going to snap to the node. It will also snap to the endpoint of a line or something else, so I always want to be sure what I'm snapping to, not accidentally snap to a contour. And I'm just going to draw the edge of pavement shots in order. Same thing for the other side. Now I've got my edge of pavement polylines drawn. They're drawn on the correct layer, but I don't want them to be a series of straight line segments. So we remember our p-edit command, which is PE. You can select a polyline to edit, or if you notice in the dialog down on the lower left, you can select multiple for multiple polylines. I'm going to select M because otherwise it will only allow me to select one. Now it will allow me to select multiple polylines. I'm going to select both sides of the pavement, right click, then I'm going to select fit, and it will draw a nice curve. Escape now to get out of that command. Draws a nice fit curve through the points that we shot in the field. So there's how we use that command. We always want to draw things on their proper layers. You notice here that I have a utility easement per restrictions. You have to read either the plat or the restrictions or whatever documents you have to see the size and location of your utility easements, setback lines, and things like that. So this particular lot has utility easements of 10 feet inside the side and rear lot lines and 20 feet inside the front lot line. So let's just isolate this layer and get rid of it. Now I'm going to restore layers. Everything's gone. So I'm going to redraw those, and I'm going to use my offset command, which is O. And I'm going to select my offset distance, which is 10. And I'm going to offset each boundary line. Oops. Then my front needs to be 20, so I'm going to offset again. I want to enter a distance of 20. Select the lines I want to offset. Now let's isolate those layers, which perhaps I should have done before to make this easier. Now I can use my fillet command to square these lines off with a fillet radius of 0, like so. Now I can join these entities together into one continuous polyline. I don't typically do that with boundary lines. I like my boundary lines to be individual segments, but with things like easements and setbacks, we can do this. Now I want to change, let's restore layers. Now I want to change this line to my utility easement layer. So I want to highlight it, and I'm going to go over here and hit this pull down. And if I hit a U, it will take me to the U's and the layer list. So you can quickly navigate to layers by hitting the beginning letter. I know that I want this on the utility layer there. So now it puts that back where we started. So I've probably been going on long enough for this lesson. We'll end it here and pick it up next time. Practice, practice.